Okay, this video is a day in the life of the average American. So, the typical person I'll see who's fat, they're going to say to me, everybody in my family is fat. The reason I'm fat is because of genetics. And so, of course, nothing to do with the food. It's because they all eat the same thing. But there's more to it than that. The incidence of obesity has gotten much worse rapidly over the last couple of decades, even faster than changes in diet. So I just want to share with you like what happens to the average American on a regular day. So they wake up and they take a shower, and they typically shower, most of them, in tap water. Not so great. They're inhaling chlorine, which is it's a real mild carcinogen, real mild. I like a carbon house water filter to get it out before it right before you use it. Have it sanitize your water until it gets to your house. The next thing is they typically use soaps and shampoos that'll contain multiple estrogenics in their soaps and shampoos. The water will typically contain F- and aluminum. Both of those things are estrogenic. It's called a metalloestrogen, aluminum. And this is neurotoxic, and it also is unhealthy in a bunch of other ways. Then they typically, after they're done with the shower, they'll use deodorant. And the deodorant's going to typically have aluminum, again, a metalloestrogen, estrogenic preservatives like the parabens, parabenzoic acids. Then they'll often put the women some perfume, the man some cologne on. Those will typically contain estrogenic phthalates. Then they'll put their clothes on, and the clothes are typically washed in an estrogenic detergent. And the estrogenic detergent is typically contained in a plastic container made out of BPA or a BPA equivalent like BPS, conditioned with phthalates. So that's three estrogens right there: the detergent, the BPA, and the phthalate. And a lot of persons use these little estrogenic squares in the dryer to minimize wrinkles. Okay, then now it's time for breakfast. They'll have some bacon and eggs, which are quite high in fat, quite high in sodium, which causes tissue hypoxia, including some brain hypoxia. The sodium's a vasoconstrictor that also decreases blood supply to the different tissues and organ systems in the brain. They'll then typically eat some meat and some processed food, which has a lack of fiber. The good bacteria feed on, there's basically two types of gut bacteria, okay? And you hear microbiome, just think there's mainly two types. The first type is the good type. When you eat a lot of fiber, it feeds the good bacteria, and they do a lot of good things. They're symbiotic with us, meaning they're mutually beneficial. We're mutually beneficial to each other, plant bacteria, because they like our fiber when we eat plant foods. The bad bacteria come from meat and processed food because of the lack of fiber in meat. There's none in processed food, very little. You get this bad gut bacteria that are not symbiotic with us. They don't care if we live or die. And so they have more of an enzyme called glucuronidase. Typically when we eat, any extra estrogen in our body, typically it's going to go to our liver. Our liver excretes it into the bile. The bile then goes into the gut, and we defecate out on excess estrogen. It's conjugated with a chemical called glucuronic acid. You can think of that as being like a glucose with a carboxylic acid on it, but the point being is that makes it more soluble in the bile. Bile is more water-like than people widely recognize. Okay, so anyways, when it goes into the bile, you defecate it out. But if you deconjugate it in the intestinal tract from that enzyme, glucuronidase, more present in the meat and processed food flora, that estrogen gets reabsorbed and a person gets high estrogen levels. I've known women, they've told me, every single woman in their family had to get a hysterectomy for fibroids before age 35. And I'm like, yeah, because you all drink tap water and you all, eat meat. So what's next? Then the person will have a cup of coffee. Caffeine's associated with hyperlipidemia, hyperglycemia, elevated cortisol. It's a stress equivalent, basically. Then they go to brush their teeth or mouthwash, and that wipes out the bacteria on their tongue. Those are the ones that convert the nitrates, NO3 from plant foods, to nitrites, NO2. And then in the stomach, the gastric acid makes it to NO, 1O. That's nitric oxide, and that gets absorbed in the blood. So they're losing the benefit of being able to get those nitrates, both from a lack of plants in the food and from using toxic toothpaste or mouthwash, wiping out their tongue bacteria. Then the women are pretty often taking birth control pills like EE2, ethinyl estradiol. That's estrogenic. Then they get into the car to go to work, and you got the new car smell quite often the first year or two. And that new car smell is especially from estrogenic chemicals like sunscreen. And I used to laugh. My cousin used to intentionally smell the car seat of a new car. And I'm like, why are you doing that, man? That's stupid, smelling plastic. He's like, oh, no, man, it smells like a woman. I like it. So, anyways, The car air freshener might be estrogenic depending on the type that it is. Then, they're doing their work or whatever in their morning, their day. They have a little snack. They have bottled water in an estrogenic plastic, something like, polyethylene terephthalate phthalate at the end there. Okay, the water will have F minus in it, again, neurotoxin. Then they go, oh, time for an energy bar. The energy bar is flavored with MSG, which is considered a neurotoxin, especially by Dr. John Olney, Russell Blaylock, Catherine Reed, PhD, etc. And often it'll contain some food dyes in it, like red number 3 and red number 40. Those are estrogenic. This guy, Anthony J., wrote a great book about estrogens called Estrogen Generation. I think I got it around here somewhere. Yeah, here it is. By the way, if you want to learn about estrogens, this is a great book. Estrogen Generation by Anthony J., PhD. I've read a whole bunch of books on estrogen chemistry. That's the best one. It's real fun. He did his PhD in estrogen and lipid chemistry, especially. Like, he knows the estrogens quite well, and he's a real entertaining writer. When it comes to food, he's an idiot, okay? He's a young guy. Young guys are macho, and they think they need meat to be big and strong. But when it comes to estrogen chemistry, he's great. Okay, what else? High fructose corn syrup from GMO corn is typically used to sweeten their so-called energy bar. And that's sprayed with atrazine. By far, it's the second most common herbicide used in the United States. It's this atrazine stuff. And it's really estrogenic. That's what you use to give it to a male frog. You can turn it into a female during embryonic development. It's powerful estrogenic chemical, okay? And then they also, typically for processed food, they'll use corn to make high fructose corn syrup to sweeten stuff. They'll put MSG in there to get the person addicted to it. And then they'll use GMO soy for the protein component of these processed foods, and that is estrogenic, okay? And it's often sprayed with this GP stuff, which is very unhealthy. This lady's done a lot of research on that and talks about it a lot. Okay, next thing for lunch. How about a diet soda pop with a little aspartame, neurotoxin? Then some salad, but the salad with dressing on it, which has got trans fats in there, atherogenic. Then if they're at home, they'll put the dishes in the dishwasher. Well, guess what? They use estrogenic dishwashing detergent. Estrogens are in most of these soaps and stuff. Like I said, they're in shampoos, they're in dishwasher soap, they're in laundry detergent. Then for dinner, they'll have some meat which contains a lot of estrogen. They'll give estrogen to farm animals because it fattens them up fast. Estrogen is a fat storage hormone. In a sense, it tells the brain that the animal is pregnant or the person's pregnant so that they should store more weight because the baby might need that for energy. Then they'll have a beer that's estrogenic, maybe some MJ after dinner, estrogenic. Maybe they'll burn a little lavender incense, estrogenic. So, when you ask yourself the question, why are Americans so often fat and diabetic and infertile and impotent with low testosterone and high estrogen and hypertensive, with a messed up immune system, lots of breast cancer, lots of prostate cancer, cognitively slow? Gee, I have no idea why. I mean, it's just a mystery. There's no reason to understand how this is happening. All these estrogenic things are totally preventable. So, anybody with a brain can learn how to avoid this stuff. It's pretty easy.